SLT අලුත් මෙගා ලයින් කනෙක්ෂන් වලට 50% දීවන. තවත් ඔෆර් ගැන දැනගන්න 121 අමතන්න.
Seeing through the fog, a legal expert sees no barriers for former Defense Secretary to renounce US citizenship.
When someone is asking to be released from the nationality, say, I don't want your country anymore, then I can't see any country telling you, no, sorry, you can't go, we are going to hold on to you.
The US ambassador, however, is not privy to the nitty-gritty of the lawsuit.
I hate to disappoint you, Interviewee, but there's not much I can actually say about this situation.
Seasonal relief. The government decides to keep fuel prices as they are in view of the festive season. More relief. The government announces measures to appease the disgruntled SME sector.
So we decided that we want to bring the lending rate down initially by 200 basis points.
Pressure to perform. Sri Lanka cricket plans to revise player contracts. The move ruffles some feathers. All this and much more coming up on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 10th of April.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to First at 9 on AdaDerana 24, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Katharina Chang. The government has decided to keep the fuel prices unchanged owing to the festive season. With the introduction of the fuel pricing formula, prices of fuel were revised on the 10th of each month. Releasing a media communique, the Minister of Finance said that the government decided to leave the fuel prices as it is in a bid to provide relief to members of the public during this festive period, despite crude prices gradually rising in the global market. It said that a barrel of crude was $67 in the month of March, and it has since risen to $74. Now, the topic of former Defense Secretary Mahinda Rajapaksa being served notices issued by US courts has become a controversial element, with some factions charging that it is a politically motivated attempt to stop the former Defense Secretary from contesting in the looming presidential election. There is also speculation that the legal proceedings against him in the US will hinder his attempts to renounce his US citizenship, critical to obtaining a presidential candidacy. With much conjecture surrounding the subject, constitutional attorney Krishmal Varnasurya today gave his take on the entire affair from a legal perspective.
Those cases, from what is reported, there are civil elections. Civil elections are instituted by parties against another party. Government of the United States is not suing someone here, no. Just because someone goes and wishes to sue someone in a civil court, the government has no bearing on that. Serving notice of an action does not necessarily mean that someone has been found guilty. And I have a further take on this, whether it's Mr. Rajapaksa or anyone else. If you are applying for some nationality and if there are allegations against you, then that country may very well decide not to give you nationality. But when someone is asking to be released from the nationality and say, I don't want your country anymore, then I can't see any country telling you, no, sorry, you can't go, we are going to hold on to you. And even if that country does, I will say, well, you can keep it and do whatever you wish with it. I don't want your country anymore and I'm going back to my country. That's a very simple way of looking at this. My opinion was, I am not talking of US or whom you refer to or whatever. I gave you a legal perspective.
How can we possibly do what the courts of the United States are supposed to do when we can't do anything from our local courts? The opposition really can say whatever they want.
In the meantime, US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Elena Teplitz, was regretful of not being able to divulge more details on legal proceedings launched against the former Defense Secretary in the United States. Speaking to Indira Amwata during our political and current affairs program at Hyde Park today, the US Ambassador, in her first televised interview in Sri Lanka, didn't give much away. insisting that it is a private affair between relevant plaintiffs and the former Defence Secretary.
Ambassador, I think I'd like to divert our attention to more current and recent media reports, especially concerning the Defence Secretary, former Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. I think there has been media reports that he has been summoned to face civil charges of torture and extrajudicial killing by the United States District Court for the Central District of California. This was US reports, and there's been a lot of talk on the media, although the former Defence Secretary denies such a case being taken up. But I'd like to hear from the US Ambassador herself what's really happening. Is there a possibility that these cases could be heard there in the United States, or will there be a threat to renunciation of his citizenship? What's really happened? We'd like to shed some light on that.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, Javeri, but there's not much I can actually say about this situation. Like you, I have heard that a civil suit has been filed against the former defense minister, and that's a private matter between plaintiffs in the United States and Mr. Rajapaksa. You really have to ask them.
So you're not privy to these?
We're not privy to the suit, so you'll have to ask them about what's going on. So I'm afraid for your listeners, they'll just have to stay tuned to you as the story breaks.
You can catch Indiviri Amawata's full interview with US Ambassador Elena Teplitz on the 17th of April at 7 p.m. at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Now moving on to other local news, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says that a decision has been made to bring down lending rates by 200 basis points. Speaking to media following a meeting at Temple Trees today, the Prime Minister went on to say that there will be special relief for small and medium enterprises, taking into consideration the challenges highlighted by the private sector pertaining to high lending rates and the difficulty to access credit from banks. The Prime Minister's comments come just days after Central Bank announced that the private sector credit would need to grow at an average rate of 75 billion rupees per month over the remainder of the year if the sector is to achieve its growth target of 13.5%.
The private sector made it known that especially the SME sector, that lending rates are very high and access to credit is difficult since the banks are reluctant to provide for TODs. TODs actually have become the basis of capital of some of our smaller enterprises. The members of the Monetary Board, the CEOs, chartered accountants, as well as officials of the Ministry of Finance, of Economic Affairs, my secretary and Mr. Malik Samarikram, we had a meeting and we've decided to implement a report given by representing Monetary Board, the Institute and the banks. So we decided that we want to bring the lending rate down initially, the real interest rates down by 200 basic points. So that's what we are working at. There will be special relief for the SMEs, and we will impose a deposit rate interest caps on banks and revise the basis for determining the existing caps on finance companies.
The third round of discussions between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna aimed at the formation of a coalition was held at the opposition leader's office in Colombo today. While representatives of the SLFP claimed that the discussion took place prioritizing a possible coalition between the parties, SLPP chairman Professor G.L. Piris, however, told First at 9 that SLFP's efforts to postpone the presidential election was at the heart of discussions.
The third round of discussions between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna was worked off today. Representing the SLFP at the talks were its General Secretary Dayasiri Jayasekara, MP Tilanga Sumathipala and the party's former General Secretary Professor Rohana Lakshman Piyadasa. The Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna was represented by its Chairman Professor G.L. Piris, MP Dala Salaha Peruma and Senior Lecturer Jagat Vallavatta. Both parties have also agreed to hold the fourth round of talks on the 9th of May. After the discussions, members of the SLFP said that the formation of an alliance between the SLFP and the SLPP took centre stage.
We are helpfully, very positively meeting today the effectiveness activities taking place at the Parliament, on the field, in Hulstop and various other things cannot be considered for our national interest unity alliance. The alliance that we are going to make is more important for these people. Every citizen of this country, which they are waiting with all the expectation. Let's make a good change, effective change, which this country is waiting for.
SLPP, however, alleged that the SLFP is attempting to postpone the presidential election, and that was at the heart of today's talks.
In particular, we expressed our deep anxiety about this culture that is now becoming entrenched in this country. No elections. We made it abundantly clear today. This was the main focus of the discussion today. People of this country have been deprived of their franchise at provincial council elections, at local government elections. Now they are going to be deprived of their right to vote at a presidential election. No way. We will do everything in our power within Parliament, in the country at large, and at the international level to safeguard for the people of Sri Lanka the most sacred of all democratic rights and freedoms. If these things are going by default, then these talks are of no value.
Minister of Power, Energy and Business Development Ravi Karunanayake heralds an end to the daily power cuts from midnight. Addressing a public event in Nuwara, Minister Karunanayake added that the government will take steps to resolve the power crisis by setting up 5 to 6 thermal power plants.
The Ceylon Electricity Board says that the average daily energy consumption in Sri Lanka is 2,300 megawatts, but the present demand has gone up to 2,600 megawatts due to the dry weather conditions prevailing in the country. As the Minister of Power and Energy has no capability to meet the added demand of 300 megawatts, daily power cuts were introduced. In such a backdrop, the Cabinet gave the nod to purchase 500 megawatts of supplementary power from the private sector. We promise that the power cut will be stopped from tomorrow onwards, and we are ready to make that a reality. Our issue was not having enough power supply to match the demand. The gap was around 400 to 500 megawatts. We joined with the private sector and purchased the necessary power. The President, the Prime Minister and the entire Cabinet of Ministers approved a permanent solution for this power crisis. They allowed the Ministry to set up new thermal power plants. We will commence those projects before the end of June.
The prevailing dry weather conditions continue to affect thousands of people across the country, with the Disaster Management Centre placing the official number close to 500,000. It places the number of people affected in the Western Province at close to 270,000. Despite the staggering figure, the DMC says the Western Province does not feel the full effects of the searing heat, largely owing to the supply of tap water. It says that in districts such as Jaffna, Puttlam and Kegol, where people are dependent on natural water sources, the ill effects of dry weather are more intensely felt.
The Disaster Management Centre says that the number of people affected by the severely dry weather conditions prevailing across the island has risen to almost 500,000. Official numbers released by the DMC places the number of people affected by the dry spell in the Western Province at 269,317 from 65,326 families. The next hardest hit is the Northern Province with 87,162 persons from 23,239 families affected. 43,233 people are affected in the Central Province across 11,856 families. In the Northwestern Province, with the number being 33,910 in the Southern Province. 29,918 persons in the Sabaragamu province are also struggling with the dry weather conditions, while 13,557 persons are in difficulty in the Eastern Province. 10,610 persons in the North Central Province are also faced with difficulties, while the least affected Uva province also has 1,539 persons inconvenienced by the dry weather conditions. Meanwhile, Assistant Director of Communications at the Disaster Management Centre, Janaka Hadumpatiraja, says that the DMC took measures to send bowsers with fresh water into dry weather affected areas. He also advised people to remain cautious and stay indoors due to the extreme weather conditions, as temperatures are expected to rise above normal levels. Meanwhile, Head of Climatic Prediction Group at India's Department of Meteorology, Dr. Sivananda Pai, warned that hot weather conditions are likely to rise further in the coming days.
For the season of April, May, June, that is the next 3 months, the temperature over most parts of South Asia, including India and Sri Lanka, is likely to be slightly above normal. In many parts of central and northern part of Indian region, the maximum temperature likely to be above normal, and the southern part, including Sri Lanka, maximum temperatures are likely to be normal to slightly above normal temperature. So that is mainly because of the El Nino condition, weak El Nino conditions which have set over Pacific.
Meanwhile, Development Director at the Ministry of Power and Energy, Sulakshana Jayawardena, said that the Ceylon Electricity Board plans to have a second attempt at inducing artificial rain in identified areas with the assistance of local engineers.
Still, the CB is monitoring with the assistance from meteorology department about the cloud condition. So now the Air Force pilots, they have experience and also CB officials. So the CB is continuously monitoring the cloud condition, weather condition. And if the favorable condition is there, CB will try to do it. And now they have planned to do again the testing process after the Sinhala Hindu New Year festival. So most probably we will be able to do it by 23rd of April if the condition is favorable for the rainmaking process.
The SLNSSS of the Sri Lankan Airlines alleged that a case has been filed against the national carrier for failing to pay the remainder of a fee owed to the UK-based aviation consultancy firm Nairas Limited. They also accuse that recommendations by this consultancy firm led to the downfall of the national carrier.
The government hired the UK-based aviation consultancy firm Nairas Limited in 2017 to prepare a restructuring plan for the national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines. The consultancy firm had accordingly handed over its report comprising of necessary recommendations. Once this government came to power, it sought the advice of the foreign consultancy firm Nairas. Their team stayed in Sri Lanka for 1 year and Sri Lankan had to bear a cost of 10 million rupees as expenses. The national carrier also provided them with air tickets for journeys to other countries. In addition, the finance ministry agreed to pay them 300 million rupees for their services. As far as we know, the government has already paid them 240 million rupees. We got to know that this company has filed a case against Sri Lankan at an European court, alleging Sri Lankan hasn't paid the remainder of their fees. Charita Ratwata and the group, with the knowledge of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, hired this consultancy firm to achieve their goal of making Sri Lankan a regional carrier. We were getting out of debt, but when these decisions were taken, we got into more trouble. We ordered Airbus A350 for Sri Lankan Airlines, which was cancelled by them. It's reported that Airbus is holding millions of dollars as a result. All of these are consequences of the cancellation of those aircraft. The leaders today are only trying to take advantage by claiming that the company needs to be closed and hand it over to the company like a mobile, which is run by the LTT diaspora. It is not possible at all. And who exactly is the Minister of Finance to put an end to Sri Lankan Airlines? It is the national carrier of Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the joint opposition also expressed views regarding the matter. They did not bring in this consultancy firm with the knowledge of the board of directors. It is with the support of Mano Tittawala, Thilan and Pakskaralingam that the carrier is made to suffer losses so they can sell it off.
The governor of the southern province, Rajit Kirti Tennakoon, signed the Gazette notification for dissolution of the Southern Provincial Council with effect from midnight today. The term of the Southern Provincial Council ended at midnight yesterday, while the final session of the council was held on Monday. Terms of office of the Eastern, North, Central and Sabaragama Provincial Councils ended in 2017, while terms of the Northwestern and Northern Provincial Councils ended last year. The term of the Western Provincial Council is slated to end from today, while the Uva Provincial Council's term will end in September. We will now cross over to a short commercial break, but make sure you stay tuned for more news on the other side.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
Reflecting the slowdown in production activity in the latter half of 2018 and the first half of 2019, global growth is set to moderate from 3.6% in 2018 to 3.3% in 2019. Now, releasing its World Economic Outlook, the International Monetary Fund said that global growth will then return to 3.6% in 2020. The forecast for 2019 is 0.4 percentage points lower than in the October 2018 World Economic Outlook, while the forecast for 2020 is 0.1 percentage point lower. Industrial production figures and surveys of purchasing managers suggest that the slower momentum in global growth is likely to continue in early 2019, and the World Economic Outlook projects a decline in growth in 2019 for 70% of the global economy. Delivering the report's forward, IMF Economic Counselor Geeta Gopinath says that although a 3.3% global expansion is still reasonable, the outlook for many countries is very challenging, with considerable uncertainties in the short term, especially as the advanced economy growth rates converge towards their modest long-term potential. She adds that, quote, while 2019 started out on a weak footing, a pickup is expected in the second half of the year. Gopinath goes on to say that this pickup is supported by significant policy accommodation by major economies, made possible by the absence of inflationary pressures despite closing output gaps. Beyond 2020, growth will stabilize at around 3.5%, bolstered mainly by growth in China and India and their increasing weight in world income. Growth in advanced economies will continue to slow gradually as the impact of US fiscal stimulus fades and growth tends towards the modest potential for the group given aging trends and low productivity growth. Growth in emerging markets and developing economies will stabilize at around 5%, though with a considerable variance between countries as subdued commodity prices and civil strife weaken prospects for some. The All-Share Price Index closed flat as a result of price losses in counters such as Ceylon Tobacco Company, John Keel's Holdings and Lanka Milk Foods, with a turnover crossing 218 million rupees. Meanwhile, the S&P 20 edged up. Foreigners remained active, with total foreign purchases accounting for 57.6% of the turnover. We now have Mahinda Rajapaksa from First Capital Holdings with a brief report.
Following the primary bill auction, secondary markets saw bullish sentiment returning to the market, pushing the overall yield curve down, with overall market witnessing high volumes. At the primary bill auction, yields of all three maturities continued to decline for the 7th consecutive week, with one-year bill falling to 9.99% after near 6-month period. Meantime, in the equity market, the index ended broadly flat, with 53% of the turnover derived through trades made in John Keel's and Dialogue, with overall market witnessing high foreign participation.
The Sri Lankan rupee ended stronger today as dollar inflows from remittances ahead of the traditional New Year provided support, while stocks closed steady in dull trade. The currency ended at 174 rupees and 60 cents to 70 cents to the dollar, compared with yesterday's close of 170 rupees from 75 to 80 cents. Let's now take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other currencies during the day. We have international news on the other side, so make sure you stay tuned for that.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
900 million registered voters, which is nearly the combined population of the whole of Europe and Brazil. About 432 million of them are women voters. 1 million polling booths and a 7-phase election. It is said to be the world's largest democratic exercise. All of it kicks off tomorrow in India as the country goes for its general election.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is rallying his nationalist base ahead of the world's biggest election, which starts tomorrow. Falling income for farmers and lack of jobs has made the election tighter than previously expected. Polls predict Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party-led alliance will just about squeeze out the parliamentary majority required to rule. That said, it is a sharp drop from his commanding mandate 5 years ago when he vowed to turn India into an economic and military power. The sentiments of the public are with BJP and Modi, with focus on national security appearing to trump concerns over jobs and farm prices. Modi ordered airstrikes on a suspected camp of militant group Jaish-e-Mohammed in Pakistan after it claimed responsibility for a deadly car bombing in Indian Kashmir in the first such raid since the neighbours' last war in 1971. Pakistan sent warplanes into India the next day and the two engaged in a dogfight. Later, both nuclear-armed foes threatened each other with missile strikes before Western powers led by the United States pulled them back. But Modi claimed victory, vowing more similar action if militant attacks continue in Kashmir. The main opposition Congress, led by Rahul Gandhi and his sister Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, who took up a party post in January, is trying to steer the campaign back to Modi's broken promises on the economy. Gandhi, as Congress leader, had attempted to forge a grand alliance with a clutch of powerful regional parties so as to avoid the splintering of votes. The election will be held in 7 phases and votes will be counted on the 23rd of May, with results likely to be clear the same day.
With Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's future yet to be decided, his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, however, looks to be heading for a 5th term after almost complete results from Israel's elections suggest a new right-wing coalition. His LIKUD party is expected to finish with a similar number of seats as ex-military chief Benny Gantz's centrist Blue and White alliance. But LIKUD and right-wing allies are said to be the largest bloc with 65 seats in the 120-seat Knesset.
Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it is a night of colossal victory today after updated exit polls of the country's national elections, which was worked off yesterday, showed Netanyahu's Likud winning more parliamentary seats than his main challenger Benny Gantz's centrist Blue and White party. Netanyahu said he had already begun talks with prospective coalition allies. Earlier, former General Benny Gantz also claimed victory after Israeli TV exit polls showed he appeared almost neck and neck with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's governing Likud party. But exit polls and early results indicated that the veteran right-wing leader Netanyahu was on course for a record 5th term. Though neither party captured a ruling majority in the 120-member Knesset, according to the polls, the surveys put Netanyahu in a stronger position to form a coalition government with right-wing factions, key to an ultimate victory. Netanyahu has been in power consecutively since 2009 and has been fighting for his political survival. He faces possible indictment in 3 graft cases and has denied wrongdoing in all 3. Palestinians in the West Bank, meanwhile, kept a close eye on the exit polls. The chief Palestinian negotiator and a close aide of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that the Israeli elections poll shows that there is no hope for a 2-state solution.
Sri Lanka Cricket is gearing to draft a player contract which will see players' remunerations being based on their performances. It is, however, reported that cricketers representing the national side are hesitant in arriving at that accommodation.
Sri Lanka's national cricket team has played 110 international matches since 2017, winning only 33 and losing a staggering 69 matches. This downturn in performance has given rise to debate within society, with question marks hovering on whether the level of service rendered by the national cricketers actually warrant their lucrative pay. Given the backdrop, Sri Lanka cricket has diverted its attention towards revising player contracts, shifting from seniority-based pay to a performance-based payment model. The new contracts are scheduled to be given to players after the announcement of the squad for the looming World Cup. That said, it is reported that several senior professional players are unhappy with the new payment model.
Of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.